Hi, everyone. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to see so many familiar names, although it'd be great to see your faces. So if you're in a place where you can do this, please turn on your cameras. It's going to be an interactive session today. So welcome to, I think we have another workshop after this, the penultimate workshop of the fall from OEI. A lot of you are in our programs and know about us, but if you aren't, plug in by signing up for our newsletter because we're about to announce what we'll be doing in the spring. Almost everything we'll be doing in the spring is virtual again, and we've learned that that makes it easier for a lot of you to access anyway. So thanks for being here. Without further ado, I would love to briefly introduce our speaker who said he doesn't really like introduction, so it will be brief. Do you know the game Two Truths and a Lie? You do. Yes. Okay, I'm gonna tell you two truths and a lie, and by the end, you can maybe figure out which one is the lie. Okay, Parmjot Valia is the University of Arkansas mentor in residence. He is also a very renowned worldwide mentor and angel investor, and he was born and raised in Arkansas. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Parmjot.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. As you can tell from my accent, I'm actually not from Fayetteville. I'm from Rogers. So, very good afternoon. Welcome. Great to see so many people. Ghazal, great to see you. Ghazal means poetry, doesn't it? To tell a ghazal is to tell a poem, I think. Is that what
No,
ghazal means?
it's like African deer.
Because in Punjabi, in Urdu, to tell a ghazal is to tell a poet, to tell beautiful poetry. So welcome, everybody. Welcome, Sarah, Catherine. Can't see you, Catherine. And Rally, what's happening? Oh, there you are, Rally. Thank you very much. It just helps me with my energy levels if I can see you. Jet, are you comfortable enough? I'm a bit worried you're not comfortable enough. Jet, are you comfortable? Great. Great, good to see you. Stay cool, dude, stay cool. So we're going to do business models. This is the style of the presentation. I want it to be very interactive because one of the things you find is, especially if you're presenting over Zoom, I can actually feed off your body language. I can feed off your energy. So do help me. I also find a top tip, if you're ever pitching or presenting on Zoom, try and do so standing up. It will improve the way you present. It will increase your energy levels enormously, because when you're sat down you just can't help but slouch, and you can't help but, so if you're presenting and it just shows the audience that you're really connecting with them and you want to be there. So I'm now going to press share screen and I'm going to go business model, making it work. Can everybody see it? Everybody see it? And I'm going to do slideshow, play from start. So we're good, and it's a whole big screen. Everybody is good. Great. My name is still Parmjot Valia. I'm also on this thing called Twitter, and I haven't been banned, or none of my tweets have been labeled as misleading so far. So do follow me on Twitter if you'd like to. If you're like, oh, bit of politics already started. So what we're going to cover today is what is a business model. So we're going to talk about what a business model is, what are the assumptions behind them. And this is very much, business models should be dynamic. They shouldn't be static. They shouldn't be these boring things that you say, oh, here it is, and it's done. They should be things that you actually use on an interactive basis regularly. And really what you're really trying to do is, if you think about what a startup means, a startup is an organization facing extreme uncertainty. That is one, not the only one, but as the one definition of a startup, an organization facing extreme uncertainty. What a business model does, it lists all those uncertainties, and what you really want to do is use the business model to test every single one of those uncertainties and think about how can you de-risk it, and fundamentally answer the question, is your cost of client acquisition significantly lower than the lifetime value of the client? Because that's ultimately the only way you can make money. So can everybody hear me okay? Are there any concerns? Natalie or Stacy, could I ask you if there are any questions? Please, I love chat. So use the chat function. Zoom invented it for a reason. They would have done this business model canvas thing as well, and they would have realized that chat function is good. So if you've got any questions, please do put the chat in. But I won't be able to follow it myself. So I need Stacy or Natalie, if you could please, only if you have the means, Natalie. Only if you have the means, Natalie means. Only if you have the means, could you ask me the question? And then I will stop immediately and respond. So what is a model? A business model is something that describes how you create, deliver, and capture value. Three equally important parts of the model: create, What is it you do? Deliver. How do you get it to your customer? Who is your customer? And capture value. A lot of businesses I know that I've invested in create, excuse me, they create and they deliver value, but they aren't able to find a way to capture value. So that is a key thing that your business model must try to explain. Excuse me. That's the other good thing about standing up. You can always just point to the corner and cough. And a business model is a way for you to think about all the assumptions and the blocks there are and test them. So what are these business model assumptions? So this is what a business model canvas looks like. I hope all of you are familiar with a basic what a canvas looks like. Don't worry, we're going to go into this in much, much greater detail. The other thing it does is it asks some fundamental questions. Who is your customer? What are you selling them? How do you deliver value? How do you talk to and engage? And where do you talk to and engage with your customer? How do you make money? What are the assets you need and what partners do you need to do the things that you do to make this magic and create value and then deliver value? And what do you actually have to do? And what does all of the above mean for your costs? All of it. What does it mean about your costs? And then make money. Okay. So all good so far. I'm speaking okay, Rally. Everything is good. I'm not speaking too fast. Guzzle, you're happy with the tone and great, brilliant. So what I want you to do is think about your business model and think about it in terms of every single one of the 9 blocks, and a business model made up of 9 blocks. Each one of those blocks has assumptions. And how can you test those assumptions? Do you have evidence that your assumptions are provable? In God we trust, everyone else bring me data was a great quote from Sarah. Who said that? You will know, Sarah. You will know. Go on, Sarah. Sarah,
What?
who said, in God we trust, everyone else bring me data?
No, don't ask me. I don't know.
Oh my gosh. Every conference I've ever been to, whenever there's a scientific question, Sarah, it was a rhetorical question, Sarah. So it was Deming who actually revolutionized Japan and actually came up with the lean methodology. So it was Deming who actually started the whole Toyota lean methodology. So it's kind of full circle. And he said, in God we trust, everyone else bring me data. So how do you have evidence that your assumptions are provable? Do you need investment? So if any of you are working on a business idea that will potentially need some investment, you will need a level of proof around the assumptions that you have made. And then what I want you to do is think about your business model and go through every single block listing. And that's a great way to use your business model. Just have lots of different multiple versions and say, how do I list all the assumptions, use post-it notes, list all the assumptions on a business model, and then how do I go about testing and experimenting and thinking through. And there are lots of great ways, and that's another session that you can do later on when you're doing business model. How do I design experiments and how do I test all of the assumptions that you may create? So that's a different workshop. So I'm not going to go through all of the business blocks, but just quick overview. So one of the blocks is customer segments. Is it niche? Is it segmented? Is it diversified? What's your value proposition? Most people think they have multiple value propositions. Actually, most people only have a couple. There's new, there's performance. McDonald's, customization. I love McDonald's. McDonald's is a great example of a business that is appealing to mass consumers, but now offers a level of customization. So for example, I've learned through the customization tool that my favorite burger is a quarter pounder with cheese, but with Big Mac sauce. Because I used to love Big Mac, but I think there's too much bread. There's too much bread on a Big Mac. Why would you order a Big Mac? Too much bread. So I can now do this through customization. So the value proposition is moving from, price to customization, brand, etc., etc., etc. So you've got channels you have to think about. Do you go direct to the customer? Do you go indirect to the customer? Do you have your own website? Do you have other people's website? Do you have your own store? Do you have other people's stores, etc., etc., etc.? And you've got to think about which stage of the customer relationship do you need to invest in. So if you're a B2C, often a lot of your investment will be made in acquiring customers. So a lot of the assumptions have to be around, how do I prove the growth hypothesis? How do I prove that my idea will grow virally? Because my relationships around acquisition. There may be some businesses where it's very, very expensive to acquire a customer, but once you've acquired them, you really, really, really want to retain them. So universities is a great example. It's very expensive for a university to acquire students. And I don't know what the rules are like in the US. Here in Canada, where I'm living at the moment, in Canada, if a student drops out within a certain period of time in the first semester, the university doesn't get any fees. I don't know if that's the same in the States. So because of that, it's extraordinarily expensive to lose students in the first semester. So universities spend a lot of time, energy, and effort retaining their students. So that's a good example where the business model means you've got to spend a lot of energy and effort on retention. And there are other businesses where the only way you can really make money is by upselling. Some people call this freemium, like LinkedIn. If you think about LinkedIn, the whole customer relationship is based on, can we upsell? Can we get people to buy our premium version? So, and then how do you make money? Do you sell something? Do you charge by usage? Do you subscribe? Do you rental? Loads of other examples. Have a look at a business model. It's again, there's a different workshop that goes through every single one of these in finite detail, etc. And I'm sure you can find loads of those workshops, but I want to focus on other things. And then what are the key resources you need? Are they physical? Are they intellectual? Are they financial? So for example, financial would be General Electric. They sell nuclear power plants. But unless you've got a spare couple of $1 billion lying around, it's extraordinarily expensive to buy a nuclear power plant. Never mind what GE is able to do, because they have financial resources, they can lend you the money to buy one of their products. I think it's the same model that drug dealers use as well, apparently, my friends tell me. So it's it's interesting how we do learn lots from other businesses and other business areas, but that is a financial resource, how to use that, where you get people to borrow money off you to buy your own product. Then there are 3 key activities that all companies or all businesses do. Do you produce something? Do you solve problems? Or do you provide a platform? Do you provide networking? So loads of examples of that we can find. And then think about, now this is something I do want you to think about that isn't covered in your business model, but I want you to think about who is your customer. Because one of the things I've noticed when I work with students on business models is they always assume the technical buyer, especially research students. Research students always assume the technical buyer is the only person I need to talk to. In most purchasing decisions, especially if it's a business to business, there are 3 people involved. There's actually a lot more than that. There's also the purchasing department. You'd be amazed how many deals go awry at the purchasing department level. There are also sometimes what we need are champion buyers or sponsor buyers. They are very, very important, but that's a different thing. But you have economic buyers, technical buyers, and user buyers. Economics are the one who writes the check. They're the ones who will pay you. Often you don't meet them, often you do. Be aware that they have who the economic buyer is, what their pitch needs are. Never assume that the same pitch will work with all 3 buyers. They want very different things. Technical buyers, and most researchers are very comfortable talking to technical buyers. Technical buyers are the ones who look at the specifications. Will this be allowed? Will this work? Is this robust enough for our system? Etc., etc., etc. And then finally, you have the user buyers. Very, very important determinants. So if you think about me presenting to you today, my economic buyer is Sarah. My technical buyer would be someone like Natalie, who actually goes through the presentation, makes sure that I meet the standards, and yeah, you need this, you've only got an hour, you've got to do it over Zoom, etc. So that's the technical buyer. Do you technically, come up to scratch? Then you are all the user buyers. So you're not paying me anything, but if I wish to do this again, I better get good feedback, and that's where the user buyer thing comes, where often if you don't do a great job engaging your user buyers, you may not get a second chance to sell to your economic technical buyers. So make sure when you're doing your business model that you're very clear which one of these buyers you are basing your assumptions on. Because often you find, to your deep frustration, that technical buyers who you love talking to have no power in the economic decision making. So one of the things you have to do very early on in your assumption testing is who makes the decision and how about buying my solution. Think about why they're a customer. Lifetime value of a customer is a very, very, very important concept. You cannot make money if it costs you more to acquire a customer than you can sell to them. So if you have a very low cost product, you need to have a very, very, very low, you can get away with having a high lifetime value of the customer if people buy it again and again and again. So a lot of business models are based on a cheap product that you will need again and again and again, so that you have a good lifetime value. So if you think about Gillette and Unilever, they have, it's quite expensive for them actually to acquire customers through all the marketing, advertising, being available in retail. But their assumption is our products are so good, the lifetime value of a customer will make it all worthwhile. You cannot make the equation work if you have a high cost of customer acquisition and the customer will only buy your product once, or there is a very low lifetime value of the customer. It's very, very difficult. The ideal ratio is something like 1/8. That varies depending on who you speak to. I have found in my experience that it's about 1/8. Now, if you can't get this to work, revisit your business model. Business models are extraordinarily iterative. The idea isn't that it's just, nope, this is the model, it's got to work. No, if one element of it doesn't work, revisit it. And then think about how you price. So this is the stuff that isn't covered in the business model thing, but I do want you to start thinking about, well, how do we price? Do we have a list price where this is the price if you're a retailer, this is the price if you're a student, this is the price if you're an end user, this is the price if you're related to me, etc., etc., etc. Product features, if it has this feature, this feature, this feature, then it's going to cost this. You know, cars are typically sold on a features basis. Do you want the sport version? Do you want this version? Do you want this version? Customer segment, if you, a lot of airlines charge you a lot more if you stay on a Saturday night, because if you stay on a Saturday night, they've worked out you are a leisure traveler, you are a tourist traveler, so they've worked out you are much more price sensitive. So the price of an air ticket will be a lot cheaper. That's why business hotels typically will charge you for Wi-Fi and breakfast. Whereas if you go to a cheap hotel, they won't charge you for Wi-Fi and they give you a free breakfast, because again, they have worked out that if you're a business traveler, you're on expenses, you don't really care what you're paying. If you are a leisure traveler, you're much more price sensitive. So does your pricing model depend on your ability to segment them? Or does it depend on, this is where I've clearly got the graphic wrong, volume, not volume that way, but volume as in how much do you buy of the product? So you can have, if you buy 10 units, it's this price. If you buy 100 units, it's this price. And then in reality, most prices are based on negotiation. Hotels and other things use yield management. We won't go into that. There are obviously real-time markets like the stock market, and eBay became very famous for its auctions. Are there any questions so far? No questions. Are there no questions? No questions. Sarah, if you had a, Sarah Caster, if you had a question, what would your question be? Sarah Caster, if you had a question, cast a question to me, don't you, Sarah?
Okay, let me think about this. See my notes here. I guess I would ask if there's another way you can understand what the lifetime value of a customer, because I know you said that it was you want to make sure it's 1/8 of the long-term ratio is less than 1/8, but how would you figure out that ratio, I guess?
It's one of those, Sarah, great question, and a very difficult question, because it's one of those things that you just have to make some assumptions and you have to prove the assumption. So one of the things you would do is you would get somebody to use a product once and then find out how often will they use the product, why will they use the product, what will trigger them using the product, and then make a calculated guess to begin with on what you think the lifetime value will be. There is somebody who is selling some soap that it is actually made from in a First Nation knowledge. So he's using this recipe that has been with the First Nation community here in Canada for hundreds of years, and he has now commercialized the soap. And this soap is phenomenal for dry skin, like phenomenal. And what he did was he gave away trial sizes, just trial sizes, because he knew that once you use the product, you'll be hooked on it for life. So he had worked out that the lifetime value will be extraordinarily high, but I've got to acquire the customer. And the only way I can acquire the customer is to give them a sample. So that's an example where he then was able to do calculations based on how often people use the soap, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All assumptions, all guesses. So far, his assumptions are being proven. So that's, I don't know if that helps you, Sarah, but thank you for the question. And be alert, everybody be alert. I will ask a question, and the next question will go to somebody who does not have their camera on. So if you don't want to be asked a question, you've got to have those cameras on. Got to have those cameras. So how do we test? So Sarah asked a question really relating to how do I test these assumptions? So the interesting thing about startup is progress, and this is great because we're at a teaching organization. Startups are, your progress is measured not by revenue, how many customers did you get, but units of validated learnings. What have you learned? What are you able to prove or disprove? Now, a lot of scientists are actually much more comfortable with the lean methodology than so-called entrepreneurs, because what you're trying to do is validate or invalidate something. So with every single assumption, you've got to design an experiment, but the experiment has got to be something that you can prove or disprove something, and it has to mean something. So for example, our assumption is that mothers do not like their children getting bee stings. So we went out and we asked 100 mothers who we saw walking in the park, would you agree that it's bad for your children to get stung by a bee? 99% said yes. Meaningless. I could have told you that the opposite isn't true. And if the opposite isn't true, because I couldn't find a majority of mothers who do want their children to have bee stings. So it's not you haven't told me anything. So experiments have to be proven or disproven. And the reason I used that example was there was somebody actually doing a cream for children, for babies, to avoid bee stings. And they did these theses and they did these experiments that said most people would like a cream, and actually their results didn't show that at all. They didn't show that at all, but they chose to show the survey selectively, which did show that. So you need to have experiments that can prove or disprove a hypothesis. And there are two key hypotheses that all organizations need to prove. There are lots of others, but there are two key ones. One is a value hypothesis. A value hypothesis is, will people use it? Do people actually derive value from it? And then there's a growth hypothesis. The lifetime value thing. So Sarah, very much around the questions you were asking, will people use it, and how will they tell other people about it? So just to give you an example of Facebook did not have a business model when they went raising money from VCs. But VCs loved Facebook. And people always say, well, Facebook was around at the same time as loads of other social media companies. What was so unique about Facebook? I'll tell you what was so unique about them. No other social media had the same number of hours spent on it than Facebook. So Facebook could demonstrate incredible value hypothesis. They could show that on average, most people go to other social media sites 3 times a week or once a day and spend an average of 7 minutes. They were able to show people when they're on Facebook, they spend at least 2 hours every single day. So that's great value hypothesis. People are using it. The next thing they could show was for every one person who joined Facebook in the early days, we had 7, they would get about 6 or 7 other people joining it, something like 6.3. So they could also prove growth hypothesis. And then the VCs turned around and thought, because you've proven value in a growth, we are sure that you can eventually prove a business, you can find a business model to work around those hypotheses. So they did this before they had a business model. You could argue that Uber is doing the same thing now. They've proven a value and a growth hypothesis. They haven't actually got a business model that works yet. Oh my God, Deb Williams is joining. We're joined by Deb Williams. Yay! I love Deb. And you should all love Deb as well. She's awesome. Right, so that's the lean method. And it's interesting, we're talking about lean, and who joined the call? Deb Williams. So there we go. So there are 3 key things your business model needs to answer. Every single one of your ideas can boil down to 3 key things: desirability, feasibility, and viability. And the question I would pose to you if I was teaching you business model, or if you're beginning a 12-week, 6-week course, is how do you prove desirability, feasibility, and viability? And what are these? Let's take a look. So this is how I look at it. So if you look at your business model canvas, the right-hand side is all around desirability. The left-hand side is around feasibility, and the bottom 2 are around viability. Do people want it? Can you prove people want it? Can you prove you know who your customers are? Which customer segments are you going through? How will you have relationships with them? What channels will you use to reach those customers? Where, when will you meet them? How will you talk to them? What is your value proposition? Can you prove that your value proposition actually meets a defined need that your customer segments have said they have? Can you link that all? Can you test the desirability? Feasibility, can you actually, let's say, yeah, loads of customers want it. Can you prove that you can actually get it done? Can you do it? So there's the market risk, which is desirability, and there's a technical risk. If I was to open up a restaurant would face, let's say I'm opening up an omelette restaurant. I know how to make omelets. There is no technical risk. And most investors face a technical and a market risk, and that's it. Can you make omelets? Yes, I can. There is no technical risk. Do people want to buy it in that location in the quantities I need to sell it? Huge market risk. The risk is entirely market. Self-driving cars, the desirability is extraordinarily strong. I mean, the dreams I've had about how I would spend my life if I had a self-driving car, oh my God, it'd be brilliant. I don't want a self-driving car. I want a self-driving recreational vehicle. That's what I really want. Because I want to go to Arkansas in an RV and just self-driving all the way with a kitchen and just sleep and just, it doesn't matter that it's going to take me 3 days to get there. It's going to be a wonderful 3 days. So that we know there's strong desirability for self-driving cars, but the risk is entirely technical. Can it be done? Can you assure me that the key partners are in place? What are the key activities you can do? Do you have competence? Do you have the ability to get that done? What are the key resources you need? Can you get hold of them? And then finally, can you make money doing this? On the left of the bottom is the cost structure, and on the right is your revenue streams. How will you actually make money from this? So have a think about those. Now, most people focus on, and when you do customer discovery stuff, and when you go through the iCall program, if some of you do, the iCall program really focuses you on desirability, because a lot of the iCall program is around scientists and researchers who have figured out the feasibility, and often they have a solution looking for a problem. So what you really try to focus on is the desirability aspect. So normally, traditionally, it may not always work. You go with the desirability first, then the feasibility, and then finally the viability. Any questions, any comments, any observations? Sarah, do you want to add anything? Have I said anything that goes against your teachings at the great institution?
No, I'm typing down every word. Like, I need to say it that way. There is a question from Narmeen. And Narmeen, I don't know if you're in a place where you can speak up, unmute yourself, or if you'd rather us just read it from the chat. She might not be. So she basically is asking, and this is a really interesting question. Does it look good to your customer to change your business model as you grow? So you're talking about iteration as you get feedback. How does that look to your customer if you're changing?
Oh, great, great. You show me someone who hasn't changed their mind. I show you someone who hasn't learned. One of my favorite philosophers is Nietzsche, and Nietzsche said, principle is the enemy of reason. So Natalie, I'm going to have a discussion with you, and then you say, yes, but to me, this is a matter of principle. Well, there's no point in us discussing it anymore, is it? Thank you, goodbye. Because, you know, reason and principle are diametrically opposed often. So great question. The whole point of this is you should change it almost rapidly every day, and it's about finding that fit where you finally find enough customers. Because what you'll do is you may change the business model because you've talked to a customer, but then you find there aren't enough of those type of customers. So then you have to say that thing works for them. Because again, what is a startup? A startup is an organization looking, another definition is an organization looking for a repeatable and scalable business. A repeatable and scalable business. Now, you do not want to fall into the trap of being a permanent consultant where every single product you make is slightly different. It's slightly, oh, we've got to tailor it. That can't be scaled, and it's not repeatable. It can still be a great business, but it can't really be a startup. That business model, the consultancy model, has already been figured out. So the reason why you wouldn't call a restaurant a startup is because it's not an organization facing extreme uncertainty. Now, the chances of it being successful are very low. The chances of a golf club being successful are scarily low. but it isn't a startup in the sense that it doesn't face extreme uncertainty. You figured out how to make it work. Whether it works or not is different, but it doesn't face extreme uncertainty. So I hope that answers your question. You will keep changing. You will change all the time, and you will find out that yes, I that customer wants this, but there aren't enough customers for me to make it viable. It's desirable and feasible, but not viable. Actually, I found a different customer segment that would want this, and there were loads of it, and I can get it done, and actually I can make money doing that. So yes, great question. It should be changing all the time. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for the question. So these are the 9 building blocks in great detail, all of those. I'm just looking at the time. Wow, we're doing well. We're doing very well on time, aren't we? Very well, wow. But those are the 9 things, so have a think about that. And I can send you the presentation as well. Do we have another question, Natalie? Do we have another question?
We do. It is from Teresa, and she asked if you're a restaurant. So if your restaurant was in a particularly niche market, then could it be considered a startup?
No. No, because then it's still market risk. Will customers come? So no, because there isn't. I would not do. I mean, Teresa, is your surname Green by any chance? Teresa Green? Oh, come on, that was a good one.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Oh, sorry, no, I was just saying, is your surname Green? But that doesn't work. It doesn't matter if you have. This, my apologies, Teresa. Okay. So, Teresa, what kind of restaurant are you thinking?
Oh, I was trying to brainstorm because you said, you know, hey, you were talking about the fact that a restaurant wouldn't be considered a startup, and so I was wondering, well, is there any case where we could make a restaurant a startup? But the answer is no. I see.
And the answer is no. And also, you wouldn't want to. You wouldn't want to go from certainty to extreme uncertainty. What we're actually trying to do is move in the opposite direction. So I would never, ever advocate ever going from certainty to extreme uncertainty. So my answer is a strong no. And in business, you rarely get. Business is an art. It'll never be a science. It's always an art. So you will rarely get people coming up with strong yes and no answers. But for that one, I think I'm comfortable saying no. And I hope you're okay with that as well.
That's perfect. So, thank you so much.
No, thank you. Great question. Keep them coming. So customer segments, as I said, mass. Is there another question, Natalie?
That's the only one I'm seeing.
Great. Stacey, do you see any questions? So the next question, Stacey, if you could just interrupt me. If you see a question, quickly get on it. Not that there's a competition between you and Natalie about who can get the question in first, but hey, wouldn't that be fun? That could be the new thing we do. Deb Williams, hope you're there. Great to, I can't see you yet, but we'll do a screen share at the end, and hopefully I'll get to say hello to my best bud, Deb.
I have a question.
Go for it, Jet.
Well, my question is, so going back to the restaurants, not being a startup, what if a restaurant has a product, has like something that they sell that's like something very different that no one else is doing, and they're selling that product, and then they want to launch that into stores, like Café du Monde in New Orleans launching like their beignet mix into stores or something like that. Would that be a startup, or would it not be because they have data that shows that people already want this, but they don't know if that translates to expanding across the country and globally?
So Will, great example.
Yes.
Well, let's look at that. I love the crowd. That's what I love about Arkansas. Great food. You love your food. You love your. We want our startup to be around food. Don't. You're really unhappy with my answer. So Will, let's look at that. Give me a specific example. So a restaurant is, what kind of product would they take?
So what I was thinking was Café du Monde in New Orleans has like, they're famous for their beignets. And so they sell.
I don't know what that is. What is that? Pardon
it's
me.
like a French donut kind of thing. And so they sell their beignet mix in stores. Like, I don't know if they sell them in Walmart, but you can buy those things. Yeah.
I would say that's not a startup. And the reason is what they've done is they've taken an existing product and they're just looking for a new channel for distribution. So what they've done is they've said, we sell this product in, that was my pen. What they've done is they've taken a product and they've said, how can we take this product into a different market? And it's a different channel. It's not you're not doing a completely different business model. Now, they might want to scale up and they might have operational issues, they might have that, but they've already de-risked the market. They've already de-risked that actually people want this. There are still risks involved. I mean, I remember McDonald's now sell, you can actually buy McDonald's in Canada, you can buy McDonald's. It's interesting, you're talking about French donuts and all this specialist, and I keep talking about donuts. It's really interesting. And I'm European and you're from Arkansas. What are the chances? You know? So, Will, when you think about McDonald's selling a McDonald's sauce across superstores in Canada, you wouldn't say McDonald's is becoming a startup because there isn't the level of risk. There aren't that level of anxiety. A restaurant will say, we can actually, that's almost a scaling up challenge. That's almost like we are just taking an existing, we're taking an existing product and take it. So if you look at the Boston Consulting Grid, you can Google Boston Consulting Grid, and what you're doing there is not Boston Consulting Grid, the Ansoff matrix, ANSOFF, Ansoff matrix. So if you Google the Ansoff matrix, it looks about how you can choose which new markets to go into, and do I have to admit people, or can someone else? Am I a co-host?
I've got it.
Oh, great. Thank you. I didn't know. Oh my gosh, all these people waiting and they haven't let them in. So Will, I hope that answers your question, because what you're doing is you're actually just scaling up. And if you look at the Ansoff matrix, that wouldn't be something that the startup does, but you're doing about, on the left-hand side, from memory, on the left-hand side of the Ansoff matrix, you've got new markets, customers, and on the other side, on the bottom axis, you've also got new markets and customers. So if you go for a new market and a new customer, that is the highest risk you can do. That's not what this restaurant is doing. What the restaurant is doing is going for a new, same market, but new customers, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So that's why I would say it's not a startup.
Okay. So in that same way, then, like McDonald's, going to your example, introducing the McGriddle, which never existed before, introducing that is not a startup because it's same customer.
Yeah, it's just new products.
Okay.
I mean, you wouldn't go to Walmart and say, oh my gosh, Walmart is doing a startup because they've introduced a new way of slicing bread. You just want it's different. It's the same product, it's a different product to the same customers in the same market.
Okay. And then my final question, something like TurboTax, being able to scan your tax with your phone, being able to scan like your W-2 and it automatically filling out your, I think it may have been the Lean Startup, but I think it was the Innovator's Dilemma. He uses that as an example of a startup in an existing business. He calls that a startup. But if that is the same customers, because everyone has to do their taxes, is that a startup?
Well, let's have a think about that. What are the risks inherent in that project? Yes, it's the same customer base, but all you're doing is sharing the same customer base. It's a new technology, new way of delivering it to them. And it's the fundamental risks is, can we do it at scale? And do we have customers who want it? So if we think about the startup in terms of desirability, feasibility, and viability, with the restaurant example, the desirability piece was solved, tick. The feasibility piece was ticked. Yeah, we know customers want this thing, this French donut. We know we can make it and at scale, and we know it's viable. No uncertainty there. With TurboTax doing this thing, will customers want to actually have it done this way? We don't know. We need to test that. Will we be able to do this at scale? Do we have the key partners in place? Maybe we can take that off, maybe we can't. And then finally, can we make money out of this? Because it's a completely different revenue model. So that's why I think that does. So I'm just trying to use what I've already taught to say that is a way to actually ask yourself the question, is this a startup or not? But I think that sometimes you've got to be careful that you don't have a debate about stuff. Because sometimes I get asked a question and I say, if my answer is yes or no, what will you do differently? And the answer is not a lot. So sometimes when you think about this thing, think about what are the practical consequences of following this train of thought. So it's a really good challenge. It's a really good question, but I hope that answers the question that it's not a startup in the food example, and it is a startup in the TurboTax example because of the desirability, feasibility, viability questions. You good with
John,
that?
I have a question for you.
Please.
Okay. What advice would you give a team of founders who have demonstrated the feasibility and the desirability, but they're this kind of in the situation where the end user is not the buyer and they don't know who the buyer is? I'm working with a team that has that issue right now, and they really, really want to pursue it because the desirability is so high, but there's no obvious paying customer. So what advice do you have about how to find or think that through about developing a hypothesis?
Okay, I love that. I love that. So can you go into detail, Sarah, or would you like me to talk to you offline about this one?
Please, do you want me to go into detail about the team?
Or? I would, yeah. It'd be very helpful. No, what I'd like to know is what are the evidence of desirability? Give me the evidence of desirability.
Okay, so the team basically wants to create, and I don't think I have any of them on this workshop. I don't see them. They want to create the greenmint.com. Basically. So it's a financial management app and tool that would help millennials and Gen Z individuals basically spend their money on things that are, sourced from companies that have a sustainability plan and meet certain metrics. And, people in that generation really want this, but they're not going to buy an app. They're not going to pay for it. They don't pay for mint.com. They want it. So their question is, how could we go about exploring, is there a paying customer for this? I have given them some ideas. I want to hear your ideas.
Okay, so to me, it fails the desirability test because a business model at the very beginning, first thing I said was create, deliver, and capture value. What they've done is demonstrate they can create value and they can potentially deliver value, but they have no way of capturing value. So it would fall outside the realms of a business model. Now, what they could do is they could charge a listing fee for companies to be, and it could be a consultancy fee that we have to certify, verify that you are indeed green minted. And then you could say to get on our list, which has 27,000 and growing by 5,000 a week customer base of millennials with disposable cash, to access those customers, you need to pay us a listing fee, or you need to pay us a special feature fee that actually it's free to get on, but you do have to pay us to do a consultancy to verify your product or to tell you what the standards you need to get to and how you need to improve your process, etc. So there is that verification business model. And then there could be a listing fee, and then there could be a advertising within the listing fee. So there are ways to do that, but if they can't come up with a way of capturing value, I would say they haven't passed the business model test.
Oh no, they definitely haven't. Yeah. That's a good idea though. I'll pass that along. Thanks.
My absolute pleasure, my absolute pleasure. Any other questions? I actually really do enjoy the interaction more because I think a lot of people can do lectures, but I think what I'd really love doing is having these discussions. And what I love about this is some of the questions I gave you, Will, were my opinions. I may have expressed them very forcefully and somebody else may have a different opinion. That's okay. That's okay. So I hope you were happy with that answer. Stacey, do we have some questions?
You do. You have one more for both you and Sarah. How does online marketing targeting work in that model, as online advertising can generate revenue? That's from Teresa.
Sarah, over to you.
Well, when you say in that model, Teresa, what model are you referring to?
Okay. Well, I was just listening to both of y'all speak, and so you were saying, it's hard to identify sort of a customer that has like sort of dollar value, if that understanding is correct. Yeah. And so then I was thinking, okay, well, what about, okay, so you've met this threshold of viewers. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right, like YouTube. And so revenue generate.
Long story short, you can generate revenue that way, just not enough to pay for software development. The expenses of the business are much greater than the revenue you would generate through advertising. And that's true for most, not all, but most software products. So, generally speaking, you're going to need to find a more promising payer and then, supplement your revenue stream with marketing often. Now, selling data is a whole other thing. So that's the direction I kind of pointed them in. And we won't go into detail because we could go into a wormhole, but the team doesn't want to do that. It's against their principles, which I completely understand. And this is the challenge of social ventures. You're weighing your mission and your profit opportunity together at the same time, but you still have to have that third element to have a business model. You got to find a way to fund it.
Sarah, so one of the things they could do is they could find that actually they are capturing value by having a benevolent funder fund them.
Yep.
So they could go to a Bloomberg type person and say, hey, you know, you want to make the world greener, we could do an offset for you if you give us X or something like that. So
Yep.
but they have to find a way of capturing the value. If they haven't done that, it does not, for me, qualify as a business model. So thank you very much. Any other questions, Stacey? No, all good? All good. Just people just chatting. Just people just saying, hey, oh, I know what I'm getting paid for Christmas. Ha ha, Deb Williams. Wow. Wow, great. Teresa, thank you very much. So I'm from Atlantic Canada. So I've gone with a pink salmon on the right-hand side, a light blue on the customer desirability seat, an aqua blue, which is the ocean. We have lots of ocean in Canada, and lifeguard orange on the cost structure and revenue stream. So what I'm saying is on the left-hand side, and I've actually got some questions that you could ask to test some thesis. So the blue, which we're going to focus on first, is around the desirability. So the blue bit is desirability, orange bit is viability, and the pink is feasibility. Okay. So what I really want you to do is desirability. What assumptions do you have about who your customers are? So Will, this may be where you could challenge me on the idea I had about the French donut thing, which is, and a French donut, it sounds like an oxymoron. It really does sound like an oxymoron, French donut. What assumptions do you have about your customer segment, about who your customers are? What assumptions about the relationship you will need? So Sarah, that again, these are great questions that the Green Mint team could ask themselves. What assumptions about how you'll be in touch with your clients? And then critically, what is your value proposition? And again, Sarah, I always get very nervous if people can't find who the economic buyer is, because a value proposition has to be linked to some pain, and you have got to be able to create gain, and that gain is sometimes called a value proposition. So if you can't identify somebody who is willing to pay for that pain to be removed, it's an irritant rather than a pain. So again, it's a really good example for us to use. But what you're looking is, what is your value proposition? So think about that again, how you test. How do you test all of these things? Then you think about the next set, which is feasibility, which is, these are the kind of questions you need to ask. What are the main things you need to do? Which partners do you need? And do you have those partners? If you're looking for investors, some of the due diligence they will do is prove to me that you have those partners in place. Prove to me. So Will, if there was a separate startup, if you and I go into business to sell this person's French donuts, we go into business. The key thing we will want to know is making sure that that agreement we have to make under license, under the brand, their product is watertight. I don't want to start a business knowing that actually they could revoke that at any time. So what partners do we need? What resources will we need? Can you actually get it done? And how much money do you need? And where will you get that money from? And critically, can you get the resources? I'm always in due diligence, you're always asking questions around feasibility, because you're hopefully at feasibility, at investment stage, you've proved the desirability. So is it sustainable? So what is your cost structure? What assumptions are you making about revenue? How often they'll pay, well they'll pay? What are the risks in your revenue model? Very, very critical question for you to ask. How robust is your financial planning? How do you test the costings? How many times have we invested in startups that, oh yeah, I thought as soon as you invested, actually I've learned from the customer, the person I want to buy the product from, that they want to charge me a lot more, and actually the customers want to pay a lot less. Happens all the time. If your pricing structure is creative, crazy, and novel, that's risky. So then you would need to give me evidence that people are willing to work with that new crazy structure. So what does the existing structure industry look like? So again, so what the business model does is the business model breaks down all of those assumptions into 9 blocks that you saw in the business model. You need to test every single one of those assumptions. You have a hypothesis, sometimes several, for every single block. You need to spend a lot of time designing and thinking creatively about experiments. And there's some really great experiments you can do, really great experiments. And maybe if we have time, which we do, we can talk about that. And you need to be able to prove or disprove your hypothesis. And ultimately, you need to have a robust and de-risked business model. And Namir, I think it was, who asked a great question at the beginning. Sarah, you asked the question. And there's your answer. Rinse and repeat. Do it all over again. Keep testing. Rinse and repeat. Keep doing it again and again and again. So do we have questions? And I will say thank you. And I'm still Project Value. I will now sit down and I will now be very happy to take questions. So I will stop share because I like seeing people. I like seeing, yay, great, I can see everybody now. Yay, Deb Williams, wah!
I feel like Jet has a question. I always have to call on you. I always do.
I'm waiting for my questions to catch up with me. This was a whirlwind.
Thank you. I don't know if that's a good thing.
It's a very good thing. I have so many things to type.
Great. Go for it, Jet.
I don't know if I have one yet. Someone else go.
Okay, cool. Teresa, thank you very much. Thank you. I try to please. You probably noticed that as soon as Deb came on the call, my performance, got a little bit better. Deb, before you joined, it was terrible. It was terrible. Low energy, no motivation, nothing. So any questions? So if Gabriella, if you had a question, what would your question be?
Well, I did hop onto the meeting kind of late, like halfway in between.
The best bit?
I don't know.
That's all right. Laura Randall. I'll ask somebody else. Laura Randall, because I can't see Laura Randall. Laura Randall, what is? Oh, Jet is now ready. Jet, and then I'm going to come to you, Laura. So get your question ready, Laura. Otherwise, we know you're not listening. You've just turned it on and you've turned everything off. So Jet, go for it. This is your big moment, Jet. Don't blow it.
Yeah. Okay. So I was just going through and trying to figure out what sparks me the most here, and I read over what I wrote down from you. You said, business is an art. It will never be a science. And like, what about it makes you feel that the most? Because like that's the thing that like made my heart drop. Like, oh man, I just want to make everything a science, but I don't know.
Because Jet, brilliant brains still get it wrong. Steve Jobs got ping wrong. Amazon have had loads of failures and they've had all the money in the world. If somebody said to me, right, I want you to invest in this thing, okay? I want you to invest in this thing. It's going to compete with Skype. What, the thing we get for free? Yes. And you'll have to pay for it. So you want me to invest in something that people can already access for free. That thing is called Zoom and we're on it now. If somebody said, listen, we're going to bet against Microsoft, we're going to get volunteers. Okay, just hear me. We're not going to pay them. We're going to have volunteers to go hours of their life to create an online encyclopedia. And we're going to compete with the world's biggest software company called Microsoft. Do any of you even remember what the Microsoft version of the encyclopedia was called? Wasn't it Encarta or something like that? Encarta? Sarah, do you remember that? Encarta? Deb?
You're calling me old? Yes, I do.
I wasn't calling you old, Sarah. Nothing wrong with being, 32. So the thing is, that's where I come from, because I think science is. So what was really interesting was so Charles Darwin had just written Origin of Species. Sorry, I get philosophical now, I hope you don't mind. So Charles Darwin had just written Origin of Species. So suddenly people are questioning everything in science. And then science had become the new religion. Science had become the new wow, science will contain all the answers. And then the Titanic happened. And people don't talk about Titanic in terms of the impact it had culturally on people. Suddenly we realized that technology and science didn't have all the answers. And I think with business, sometimes, you know, you can always spot when a bubble is occurring in business because a lot of hubris builds up and a lot of, we know the answers, we have an algorithm, until we don't. So I think, Jet, we have to be constantly reminded that all knowledge is temporary until the new thing comes along and challenges us. And what we have to do is be learning machines. And if we're going to thrive in the 21st century, we have to be learning machines. And the most important skill, I think, for the 21st century, and all of you are a lot younger than I am and have hopefully much brighter careers. One thing I'd say, the key skill for you is not your ability to learn, but your ability to unlearn. And that might sound like a pithy thing to say, but I mean it. I mean, the ability to dump knowledge to acquire new knowledge is very, very powerful, very powerful. And I think what is holding me back, I could be better if I could dump knowledge, if I could dump sacred cows quicker. That was a philosophical answer to your question, but I hope you enjoyed that.
Oh, that was
add
grand.
one thing
Thank
to
you.
that. Not that this is not maybe as philosophical, but science is also very slow. So business can't move at that pace. You can't test every hypothesis to statistical significance, because if you took the time to do that, you wouldn't get your idea to the market for 10 years, and the market has changed. So the ability to unlearn paired with the speed of getting something out there to customers, those skills combined are pretty powerful.
Like people have this conversation, Sarah, all the time, don't they, about IP? And actually, sometimes IP is great. Having an IP strategy is phenomenal, and sometimes it's absolutely vital because that's what investors are coming into. Often, though, a lot of investors will say, "Speed to market, speed to market." You know, traction is the new IP. So you know, that's another example. So I'm not letting you off the hook, Laura. Laura, I'm not letting you off the hook. Do you have a question, Laura Randall?
Actually don't have a question. That was a great presentation. I promise I've been listening the whole time. I'm just at desk shift for RA, so I wasn't turning my camera on right now.
So Laura, at 6:10 and 30 seconds, what was I saying?
At 6:10, no,
6:10 my time. 6:10 my time. No, I'm only joking. Only joking. So that is great. We are on time. We are on time. So I just want to say, Jet, thank you very much. Natalie, thank you very, very much for hosting this and making this a very easy process for me. Thank you. Sarah, always great to see you. Great to work with you. It's always a pleasure. Sarah, hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed. Stacey, thank you very much indeed. Will, great challenges, great questions. Ghazal, I now know what Ghazal means, so thank you very much. I have learned something, so that's awesome. Teresa, thank you very much for the great questions. Gabriella, thank you, Matt. Deb, always a joy to see you. You've got to join at the earliest so that everybody gets, you know, the 100% performance all the time. Julia, we didn't get to talk, I'm afraid. My loss, not yours. Hopefully next time you'll ask a question. Julia, did you have a question? No, that's good. Natalie, I can't see you, but I know you're there in spirit. So thank you. And Laura, I've heard your voice, so thank you. And Madeline, thank you again. Nameen, thank you very much. Very, very nice. And Sarah, my pleasure. And Carl Halliburton, thank you and good night.